My name is Erin Bassett, and I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs and Policy at BioCanRx. So immunotherapies cover quite a broad range of product types. They can be, for example, oncolytic viruses, or antibody-based therapies, or cell-based therapies, or cancer vaccines. And for the most part, regulators, which in Canada is Health Canada, regulate these products as drugs. So that means they're subject to the food and drug regulations, and they're regulated in the same way that other drug products are regulated in Canada. Immunotherapies are typically classified as biologic drug products, and this means that they come from living organisms or cells. This also means that they can be rather complex products, and so they come with some regulatory complexities. The regulations cover many different facets, and they also cover how these products are manufactured or how they're made. And when it comes to some immunotherapies, some of these therapies can be quite cutting edge, and they can be made in ways that are a bit of a departure from how we typically think about manufacturing paradigms. In particular, some immunotherapies can be personalized, meaning that they're made from a patient's cells, which are taken from the patient, and then they're modified or expanded in some way, and then they're given back to the patient. There's a lot of challenges around the best way to regulate these products, but there are a lot of interesting conversations happening right now on the regulatory front to make sure that regulatory rigor is maintained, but we can also think about some interesting manufacturing approaches like near-patient manufacturing or point-of-care manufacturing, and how do we regulate these in a way that enables them to get to as many patients as possible. So there's many steps that a drug has to go through before it can reach a patient. We first have to think about all of the preclinical studies that have to be done. This can be very time-consuming and very expensive. And I will note that this is an underfunded area of research, but it is one that BioCanRx prioritizes as part of our research funding program. So all of this preclinical work has to show that there's compelling biology for the product, look at the mechanism of action, how it works, ensure that it has the potential to treat a human disease. And then there's also a lot of manufacturing process development that has to occur as well. So we have to work out how the drug is made and also make sure that it's made in a high quality way that can be used clinically. And then there are also preclinical safety studies that have to be done. So the drug product has to be shown that it's safe to go into humans. After all of that happens, the drug can be tested in clinical trials. So a clinical trial is a way to very rigorously test the use of a drug product in humans. So it's done in a very controlled way with a well-designed study. And in a clinical trial, the ultimate goal is to assess the safety of the product in humans and to collect evidence on its efficacy in whatever the disease or condition is that's being studied. And if we think about oncology trials, what an oncology trial might be doing is looking at a new drug and comparing it to what the standard of care is for patients currently. And in this way, we're always looking for better ways to treat cancer patients and to make sure that they're getting the best care possible in Canada. So that's one way that patients can access a drug, is by participating in clinical research. If the clinical research is successful and the product can meet some manufacturing and quality standards, it can then potentially achieve what we call market authorization. So that means it's approved for sale in Canada. So that means that patients can now potentially access it, not as part of clinical research, but as part of standard of care for that particular disease type. But, and there's a big but here, just because Health Canada gives market authorization to a product, it doesn't mean that patients can automatically access it. There's quite a few additional steps that the product has to go through before it can actually reach patients. Health technology assessment, looking at the value of the product in the healthcare system, and also pricing negotiations with the manufacturers. Ultimately, the decision is in the provinces and territories in terms of whether a drug will be reimbursed and can get to patients. So it's a very long process and a very long journey before it can actually reach patients as part of standard of care. Canada has strong clinical research activity. Clinical trials are quite common at major centers that are centered in urban areas, but for patients in rural or remote areas, it can be more challenging to access a clinical trial. So there are organizations that generally support clinical trials, like the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, or CIHR. And there are also a number of patient-oriented organizations or charities that will support cancer clinical trials, like, for example, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Canada or Canadian Cancer Society. But when it comes to specifically targeting clinical trials for cancer immunotherapy, that is unique to BioCanRx. So there are a few ways that patients can learn about clinical trials. So one way is to talk to their doctor and make sure they express to their doctor that they're interested in participating in clinical research. The patients can also go to patient organizations. There are many patient organizations that are fantastic resources for cancer patients, and they can educate patients on clinical trials in general, but they can also help point the patients to clinical trials that they might be eligible for their disease type. Patients can also search themselves online, which can be kind of a challenging and a daunting task, but to this end, the Canadian Cancer Society has actually established a website called Cancer Trials Canada, and included in that website is general information for patients, but also a searchable database for cancer trials in Canada, which is a great step forward.